The numbers on the screen stared back, hollow as a skull's eyes. My life savings? Gone. Not misplaced, not an error I could call the bank about with a mildly annoyed tone, but utterly, terrifyingly vanished. It was a Tuesday, I remember. The kind of gray, unassuming morning that usually blends into the week. But this one tore a hole right through the fabric of my world. I'd logged in to pay a bill, a mundane task, and there it was. Or rather, there it wasn't. Years of careful scrimping, of overtime when my bones ached, of saying no to small pleasures so there would be a cushion, a legacy, something, all wiped clean. Have you ever felt the ground simply cease to exist beneath your feet? That was me, gripping the edge of my small kitchen table, the floral plastic tablecloth suddenly the only solid thing in a spinning universe. My first thought, a wild, panicked bird in my chest, was of hackers, of some faceless thief in a distant country. But a cold dread, heavy and sickening, began to seep in, far more personal than any anonymous crime. Sarah, my only daughter. The name whispered itself in the silent room, a soundless accusation I tried to bat away. She'd been different lately. A little too bright, a little too brittle when I asked about her job, her finances. She'd mentioned wanting a fresh start, a place of her own, something grander than her little apartment. I'd sympathized, of course, offered what little advice an old woman could. I'd even thought, in a fleeting moment of maternal pride, that perhaps she'd finally found her footing, landed some wonderful opportunity. The naivety of it burns, even now. That morning, the coffee grew cold in its chipped mug, forgotten. I must have sat there for hours, replaying conversations, expressions, little silences that now screamed with meaning. The casual questions about my banking, disguised as concern for my security. The way she'd helped me set up online access, her fingers flying over the keyboard. To make things easier for you, Mom. Easier for whom? I now wondered, the words like acid in my throat. It was a betrayal too vast to comprehend, a theft not just of money, but of memory, of trust so profound it had been the bedrock of my life. This wasn't just about the sum, the figures that had represented security. It was the hand that had taken it. The hand I had held as a baby, the hand I had guided to write her first letters, the hand that had, apparently, signed away my future without a tremor. My little girl. How could she? The question echoed in the emptiness of the account, in the hollowness growing inside me. The sun eventually shifted, casting long, accusatory shadows across my kitchen floor. And still, I sat, the truth a lead weight in my stomach. Gone. All of it. Gone. And a small, terrible voice whispered, "She took it. She took it all." The confirmation, when it came, was almost a relief, a brutal end to the agonizing uncertainty. It wasn't a sophisticated hack, it was my own flesh and blood. A series of transfers, bold and methodical, over several weeks, siphoning away my life like a slow bleed. The bank statements, when I finally steeled myself to examine them, laid it bare. Each transaction was a fresh stab. Sarah's name wasn't directly on them, of course. She wasn't a fool, just heartless, but the pattern, the timing, the amounts, it all pointed one way. I remembered her asking, so casually, about my old account details. Just in case, Mum, for emergencies. What a fool I'd been. What a trusting, naive old fool. The weight of that betrayal settled deeper, colder than the winter that was beginning to bite at the window panes. It wasn't just the money. It was the calculated deception, the sheer audacity of it. To look me in the eye, day after day, knowing what she was doing. Knowing she was dismantling my peace of mind, my security, brick by stolen brick. I thought of all the sacrifices. The new winter coat I'd foregone for myself so she could have the smart school blazer. The holidays I'd never taken, preferring to add a little more to that nest egg, the one she'd now smashed. Each memory was a fresh torment. She hadn't just stolen my savings. She'd stolen parts of my past, tainting them with her deceit. I felt erased, as if my life's work, my careful stewardship of what little I had, meant nothing, less than nothing. It was fuel for her ambitions, apparently. Did she even hesitate? I wondered. Did a single tremor of guilt cross her mind as she clicked that button again and again? Or was I just an obstacle, a resource to be depleted? Amidst the grief, a different emotion began to stir, a tiny, hard ember glowing in the ashes of my sorrow. Anger. A righteous, slow-burning anger. This wasn't just an injustice, it was a desecration. And I, Eleanor, the woman who had always paid her bills on time, who had always believed in honesty and hard work, would not let this stand. The first thought wasn't of revenge, not yet. It was simpler. This isn't right. This cannot be the end of the story. My story. I could have confronted her then, of course. Screamed, cried, demanded answers. But what would that achieve? Tears? False apologies? More lies? No. Something in me knew, with a chilling certainty, that a direct confrontation would only allow her to control the narrative, to perhaps even twist it, to make me the villain, the uncomprehending old mother. A quiet resolve began to form, a decision made not in heat, but in the cold clarity of profound hurt. I would watch, I would wait, and I would understand the depth of this betrayal before I acted. The silence in my small house grew, but it was no longer a silence of shock. It was the silence of a hunter, waiting. My decision to remain silent, to observe, felt less like a choice and more like an instinct. A wounded animal retreats, licks its wounds, and watches. I became a student of my daughter, Sarah, seeing her with new, painfully clear eyes. The veil of maternal love, so thick and forgiving, had been ripped away, revealing someone I barely recognized. Her sudden affluence was the first glaring sign. New clothes, expensive dinners she'd post about with a carefree air, a certain gloss she hadn't possessed before. She'd attribute it to a bonus, or a small inheritance from a distant aunt I never knew existed. Lies spun so casually they almost sounded plausible, if your heart wasn't already shattered by the truth. I'd nod, offer a weak smile, and file away each lie like a piece of damning evidence. The pain of this charade was a constant, dull ache. To sit across from her, sharing a cup of tea, and know that the very cup she held was, in a way, bought with my stolen years. It was a peculiar kind of torture, self-inflicted, yet necessary. One afternoon, while she was visiting, her visits now tinged with a forced cheerfulness that grated on my nerves, she left her phone on my side table while she took a call outside. A message pinged. I didn't mean to look, truly, but the sender's name was Mark, Realtor. My blood ran cold. Mark. She'd mentioned a new man, someone serious. A Realtor. The pieces began to click into place with sickening precision. The house. She was buying a house. My house. Effectively. Later, I'd accidentally find a glossy brochure tucked into her handbag, left carelessly open on my sofa. A beautiful, modern monstrosity with a sprawling garden, the kind of place I'd only ever dreamed of for her, but earned through honest means. The address was there. My stolen savings weren't just numbers in an account anymore. They were taking physical form, a monument to her deceit. I started to gather my strength, my evidence. I visited a solicitor, Miss Davies, a kind woman with sharp eyes who listened to my story without a hint of judgment, only a quiet, simmering indignation on my behalf. She explained my options, the legal pathways. The police? Yes, that was one route. But something held me back. This was family. A Goderita, come, as they say, dirty linen, better washed in private, if possible. Or at least, revealed on my own terms. Mrs. Davies understood. She helped me document everything. The bank statements. My timeline of Sarah's actions. her newfound wealth. Each signature on those affidavits felt like a small act of reclamation. The quiet planning began. Not a plan of revenge, not yet, but a plan for truth. The house became the focus, the symbol of it all. My savings weren't just gone. They were there, in those bricks and mortar, in that manicured lawn she would soon call her own. And the thought began to bloom, a dark flower in my mind. She would not enjoy it. Not truly. Not if I had anything to say about it. Then came the announcement, delivered with a flourish that felt like a personal insult. Sarah, radiant and beaming, her hand clasped in that of her Mark. The realtor, of course, gathered what little family we had left, mostly distant cousins and a few old friends of mine, for a small dinner. "We have some wonderful news," she'd chirped, her eyes sparkling, I now realized, with the gleam of my pilfered future. "Mark and I are getting married." And she paused for dramatic effect, her gaze sweeping over us. "We've bought the most wonderful house. It's a dream come true. A dream built on a nightmare," I thought, the words a bitter taste in my mouth. "The wedding," she explained, "would be soon. And lavish. A celebration of our love and our new beginning," Mark added, oblivious, a puppet in her play. The irony was a physical blow. A lavish wedding, a grand house, all funded by the life savings of the mother she was currently smiling at with such apparent affection. Did she feel no shame? No flicker of fear that her elaborate deception would crumble? Or did she simply believe I was too old, too frail, too beaten down to ever uncover the truth, or to act upon it if I did? That was her mistake. My grief had been profound. Yes, my shock, debilitating. But underneath it all, the steel in my spine, forged through years of quiet resilience, was beginning to harden. The wedding. It presented itself not as another injury, but as an opportunity, a stage. What better place to reveal the truth than at the celebration of a union founded on a lie? The plan began to solidify, taking shape with a cold, clear precision that surprised even me. It wouldn't be a hysterical outburst. No. It would be calm, measured, and utterly devastating. Mrs. Davies, my solicitor, was a rock. We spoke of timing, of the most impactful way to deliver the evidence without turning it into a circus. The legal documents were being prepared, not just to reclaim my money, but to ensure the house, my house, would not remain in her possession. The emotional toll of these preparations was immense. I had to maintain a facade of normalcy with Sarah, to attend pre-wedding events, to feign enthusiasm for her dress, her flowers, her fraudulent happiness. Each smile I offered her felt like a betrayal of myself, yet it was a necessary mask. "You look tired, Mum," she'd say sometimes, a hint of something unreadable in her eyes. Was it guilt? Or just irritation that I wasn't playing my part with enough gusto? "Just the excitement, dear," I'd reply, my voice even, while inside a storm was gathering. A storm that would break on her wedding day. The decision was made. The path was set. There was a strange, almost serene sense of purpose in me now. The pain was still there, a constant companion, but it was now overlaid with a resolute determination. She had built her castle on my ruins. It was time to show her the foundations were made of sand. The days leading up to the wedding were a masterclass in duality. Outwardly, I was the mother of the bride, a role I played with a quiet dignity that many mistook for serene happiness. I attended the final dress fitting, murmuring appropriate compliments about the lace, the ridiculous train, all the while calculating the cost, wondering how much of my nest egg had been transformed into shimmering satin. I listened to discussions about floral arrangements and seating charts, my mind a calm lake on the surface, but with powerful currents moving beneath. Inside, I was a woman preparing for battle. My solicitor, Mrs. Davies, and I had finalized every detail. The documents were ready, notarized, and damning. There was a letter, too. Not a letter of anger, but of fact. A clear, concise account of the theft, the discovery, and the undeniable truth. I carried a copy of it everywhere, like a talisman, a reminder of what had to be done. My grandson, Tom, Sarah's nephew from my late son, became an unwitting confidant, in a way. He was a good lad, sensible, with eyes that saw more than he let on. He'd noticed my quietness, the shadows under my eyes. "Are you all right, Grandma?" he'd asked, his brow furrowed with genuine concern. I couldn't tell him everything. Not yet. It wasn't his burden to bear. But I found solace in his presence, his uncomplicated affection, a balm to my wounded spirit. "Just a lot on my mind, Tom," I'd said, patting his hand. "Weddings, you know." He nodded, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. He knew Sarah, too. He knew her ambition, her occasional carelessness with other people's feelings. Perhaps, on some level, he sensed the discord. I used metaphors to keep myself steady. My life had been a garden, carefully tended. Sarah had come like a blight, a thief in the night, uprooting precious things. Now, it was time to weed, to pull out the invasive species, no matter how painful, so that something true and healthy could grow again. The house she'd bought, that monument to her greed, loomed large in my mind. I imagined its new paint, its gleaming windows, all paid for with my years of sacrifice. Soon, the ownership of that house would be challenged. Soon, the charade would end. The weight of the impending confrontation was immense. There were moments, late at night, when the old maternal love, so deeply ingrained, would surface, whispering doubts. Was this too harsh? Was there another way? But then the memory of that empty bank account, the coldness of her deception, would return, and my resolve would harden like tempered steel. This wasn't about revenge. Not solely. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming not just my money, but my dignity, my story. The silence in my house was no longer just watchful. It was pregnant, like the stillness before an earthquake. The mask of serenity was firmly in place. The storm was coming. The wedding day dawned bright and unforgivingly clear, the kind of perfect autumn day that mocks any inner turmoil. The venue was as ostentatious as I'd imagined, a sprawling country estate with manicured lawns and fountains that gurgled merrily, indifferent to the drama about to unfold. It screamed of money, new money, my money. I moved through the preparations like a ghost in my own life, polite and smiling, accepting compliments on my dress, on how well I looked. "You must be so proud, Eleanor," distant relatives would gush, and I'd offer a small, enigmatic smile. Proud? I was a cauldron of emotions. Pride so far down the list it was almost invisible. I saw Sarah, a vision in white, fussed over by bridesmaids, her laughter a little too loud, her eyes a little too bright. She was the picture of bridal bliss, utterly oblivious. Or perhaps willfully ignorant. Did she truly believe her secret was safe, that her betrayal would go unpunished? She caught my eye once, across the bustling room where makeup artists and hairdressers buzzed like expensive bees. She offered me a brilliant, confident smile. I returned it with one of my own, one I'd been practicing, one that held a universe of unspoken truths. The tension inside me was a tightly wound spring, yet on the surface, I projected an almost unnerving calm. Mrs. Davies's final instructions echoed in my mind. Wait for the right moment. After the vows, before the reception speeches truly begin, let them have their I-dos. It makes the contrast sharper. Cruel, perhaps, but necessary. This wasn't just about exposing a theft. It was about dismantling a carefully constructed lie, a life built on deceit. Throughout the morning, as guests arrived, cooing over the decor, the champagne flowing freely, I observed. I saw the groom, Mark, beaming, clearly besotted and, I suspected, largely unaware of the true source of his bride's sudden wealth. He seemed a decent enough man, caught in Sarah's web. I felt a fleeting pang of pity for him, but it was quickly suppressed. He would learn the truth soon enough, along with everyone else. My heart beat a steady, resolute rhythm against my ribs. This was it, the culmination of months of pain, planning, and silent endurance. I thought of my late husband, how he'd always valued integrity above all else. He would have been heartbroken by Sarah's actions, but I hoped he would have understood mine. This wasn't just for me. It was for him, too. For the values we'd tried to instill. The air crackled with a strange energy, at least for me. The scent of expensive flowers, the murmur of polite conversation, the clinking of glasses. It all felt like a prelude, the orchestra tuning up before a dramatic final act. And I, Eleanor, was ready for my cue. The ceremony itself was a masterclass in hypocrisy, held in a ridiculously ornate conservatory, sunlight streaming through the glass roof. It was everything Sarah had ever dreamed of, I supposed. Beautiful, expensive, and utterly hollow. I watched as she glided down the aisle on the arm of a distant uncle, her father, my dear John, long gone. A mercy, perhaps, so he wouldn't have to witness this. Her vows, when she spoke them, were filled with words like trust, honesty, forever. Each word was a tiny, sharp icicle piercing my heart, yet also strengthening my resolve. Mark, poor man, recited his with genuine emotion, his eyes shining with love for a woman who was, in essence, a carefully crafted illusion. I do, they both proclaimed, their voices ringing out in the flower-filled space. The officiant beamed. The guests sighed contentedly. And I? I felt a profound weariness, a deep sadness for the daughter I had lost long before this day, mixed with a cold, hard anger that had become my unwelcome companion. My internal countdown had begun. I replayed memories of Sarah as a child, a bright, eager girl, full of promise. Where had that girl gone? When had the seeds of such profound selfishness taken root? Was it something I did? Something I failed to do? These questions, the torment of every betrayed parent, flickered through my mind, but I pushed them away. Now was not the time for self-recrimination. Now was the time for action. I thought of the sacrifices. The small cottage by the sea I'd dreamed of for my retirement. A dream I'd shared with John. A dream now buried under the foundations of Sarah's grand new house. The careful savings, accumulated penny by painful penny, meant for a secure old age, for a little something to leave for Tom, my grandson. All of it, nonchalantly swept away by her greed. As the applause for the newly married couple subsided, and the officiant invited them to sign the register, I knew my moment was approaching. The transition to the reception, the celebratory toasts, that was the window. Mrs. Davies had been clear. Let the ink dry on the certificate, metaphorically speaking. Then, before anyone gets too comfortable in the lie, present the truth. My hand went to the clutch bag on my lap. Inside, the letter, the documents. My voice, when it finally came, would not tremble. It would be the voice of a mother, yes, but also the voice of justice. The rustle of silks and the murmur of congratulations filled the air. Sarah looked ecstatic, triumphant. She had it all, she thought. The husband, the house, the perfect wedding. She was wrong. She was about to find out just how wrong. The feeling of righteous anger, long simmering, now solidified into a cold, unshakable purpose. This was not just my money. This was my life, my dignity. And I was taking it back. The guests were beginning to move, a river of pastel and silk flowing towards the marquee where the reception was to be held. Champagne was already being poured. Laughter, light and airy, floated on the breeze. Sarah and Mark stood near the entrance, a receiving line of sorts, accepting congratulations. Her smile a dazzling, brittle thing. This was it. I took a breath, held it for a moment, then let it out slowly. I walked towards them, not with aggression, but with a quiet, deliberate pace that seemed to make the space around me still. A few people turned, curious perhaps at the old woman walking with such singular focus. Sarah saw me approaching, her smile faltering for a microsecond before being plastered back on. "Mum, there you are! Isn't it all wonderful?" she said, her voice a little too high. Mark beamed beside her. Eleanor, so glad you're here to celebrate with us. I stopped a few feet from them. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quality of the silence that began to spread around us was enough. Sarah? I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the festive hum. Mark, before the celebrations go any further, there's something you all need to know. Heads turned. The laughter died down. I could feel the shift in the atmosphere, from joy to uneasy curiosity. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Mum, what are you doing? This isn't the time. Oh, but it was. It was the perfect time. This beautiful wedding, I continued, my gaze sweeping over the stunned faces of the nearby guests, then settling back on my daughter. This magnificent house you've both spoken of with such pride, it's all been made possible by a very generous benefactor. Mark looked pleased, perhaps thinking I was about to praise Sarah's financial acumen. Sarah, however, looked like a cornered animal. Mum, please, she hissed, a note of panic creeping in. I ignored her. I opened my clutch bag and took out the letter, a single folded sheet. That benefactor, I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that surprised even myself, was me, unwittingly. Because, you see, Sarah, my darling daughter, funded her new life, this wedding, that house, by systematically emptying my entire life savings. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Mark's smile vanished, replaced by a look of utter bewilderment. He looked at Sarah, then at me, then back at Sarah. What? What is she talking about, Sarah? Sarah's face had gone chalk white. She's confused, she stammered, her eyes darting around. She doesn't know what she's saying. She's old. Old, yes, but not senile, not blind. I held up the letter. I have bank statements, transfer records, a full accounting prepared by my solicitor. It's all here. Every penny she took, over £80,000, my security, my future. The amount hung in the air, heavy and obscene. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply stated the facts. My voice was the sound of righteous anger, yes, but also profound, unbearable sorrow. The facade didn't just crack, it shattered. Sarah stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and fury. The beautiful bride, moments before radiant, now looked like a trapped thing, exposed and raw. The truth, once spoken, had a power all its own. It sucked the air from the celebration, leaving behind a stunned, horrified silence. The only sound was the distant, indifferent chirping of birds. Justice, I thought, has a quiet voice, but it echoes loudly in guilty ears. The immediate aftermath was a tableau of frozen disbelief. Guests stood like statues, champagne flutes halfway to their lips, eyes wide and fixed on Sarah, then on me, then back again. Mark, the groom, looked as though he'd been physically struck. His face, moments before alight with joy, was now a mask of confusion, rapidly hardening into dawning horror. He turned to Sarah, his voice barely a whisper, but carrying in the sudden, deafening silence. Sarah, is this true? Sarah didn't answer. She couldn't. Her carefully constructed world had just imploded. She looked from Mark's accusing face to the ring of shocked guests, and finally, to me. Her expression was a maelstrom of shame, anger, and a desperate clawing panic. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. But the memory of my empty bank account, the calculated cruelty of her deception, was too fresh, too raw. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable, until someone, a distant cousin perhaps, nervously cleared their throat. Then, the whispers started, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Mark finally found his voice again, stronger this time, laced with an icy fury. Sarah, tell me this isn't true. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Tears welled in her eyes, but they looked like tears of frustration, of being caught, rather than remorse. Then, the dam broke. not with an apology, but with defiance. "She's lying!" Sarah shrieked, her voice shrill, tearing the last vestiges of bridal elegance to shreds. "She's always been jealous of me. She's trying to ruin my happiness." But her denial was hollow, unconvincing even to her own ears, I suspect. I simply stood there, holding the letter, my expression one of weary sorrow, not triumph. The facts spoke for themselves. Mrs. Davies, bless her pragmatic soul, had advised me on this. She had a representative, a discreet legal clerk, waiting unobtrusively amongst the caterers. At a subtle nod from me, he stepped forward, calm and professional, and handed a prepared statement and a copy of the core evidence to Mark's stunned parents, who were standing nearby, their faces ashen. He then approached Mark directly. "Mr. Henderson," he said quietly, "I represent Mrs. Eleanor Ainsworth. These documents corroborate her statement. We have already initiated legal proceedings to recover the stolen funds and to place a lien on the property purchased with those funds. The property, the house, the word lien hung in the air. The wedding was over, not just figuratively, but literally." Mark stared at the papers in the clerk's hand, then at Sarah, his face a battleground of disbelief and betrayal. He slowly, deliberately, removed the wedding ring from his finger and let it drop to the manicured grass. It landed with a soft, almost inaudible thud, but it resonated like a cannon shot. The beautiful, lavish wedding, built on a foundation of lies, had crumbled to dust in a matter of minutes. Sarah finally broke down, not in sobs of regret, but in howls of rage and despair. It was an ugly sound. The victory, if you could call it that, was profoundly bittersweet. Justice had been served, yes. The truth was out. But in that moment, looking at the wreckage of my daughter's life, my heart ached with a grief that was almost as sharp as the initial betrayal. I had reclaimed my money, or begun the process, but I had well and truly lost my daughter. The days and weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings, hushed phone calls, and the slow, painful process of picking up the pieces. The wedding, of course, was officially off. The guests had dispersed in a state of shock, leaving behind a scene of abandoned finery and ruined dreams. Sarah, I heard, had retreated, humiliated and furious. There were attempts at contact, angry voicemails, tearful messages relayed through bewildered relatives. I didn't engage. What was there to say? The truth had been spoken. The consequences were now hers to bear. Mrs. Davies was efficient. The lien on the house was secured quickly. The legal battle to reclaim the full sum of my savings was more protracted, but the evidence was overwhelming. Sarah, stripped of her ill-gotten gains and her respectable fiancé, had little fight left in her. The house, that monument to her deceit, was eventually sold, the proceeds, after legal fees, slowly making their way back to my account. It wasn't the same, of course. Money that has been stolen and then returned feels tainted somehow. It no longer held the promise of a peaceful retirement, only the bitter taste of betrayal. My grandson, Tom, was a quiet source of strength during this time. He didn't pry, didn't offer platitudes. He just showed up with groceries, or to fix a leaky tap, his presence a silent affirmation of loyalty. He asked once, very gently, "Grandma, are you okay?" I looked at him, this good, honest young man, and saw the future, not the ruined past. "I will be, Tom," I told him, and I meant it. It's a hard lesson, but some weeds need to be pulled, no matter how much it hurts the garden. He understood. The community, my small circle of friends and neighbors, were surprisingly supportive. There was gossip, naturally. How could there not be? But mostly, there was a quiet sympathy, an understanding that I had done what had to be done. Some condemned Sarah outright. Others, older mothers like myself, looked at me with a kind of pained recognition, understanding the impossible choice I'd faced. The victory was indeed bittersweet. There was a grim satisfaction in seeing justice done, in knowing that she hadn't gotten away with it. But the cost was enormous. A daughter lost to her own greed and deceit. A family fractured. Was it worth it? Yes. It had to be. To allow such a betrayal to stand unchallenged would have been to diminish myself, to invalidate my own life of hard work and integrity. It was about more than the money. It was about self-respect. It was about truth. The house I had inadvertently bought for her was gone from her grasp. My savings were slowly being restored. But the relationship, the bond between mother and child, that was shattered beyond repair. And that was a loss I would carry with me, a quiet ache in the fabric of my days, even amidst the hard-won peace of reclaimed dignity. Looking back, the path I chose was a lonely one, a path paved with difficult decisions and profound emotional pain. But it was my path, and I walked it with the conviction that I was doing what was right, not just for myself, but for the principle of integrity. Life after the storm is quieter. The dramatic crescendo of the wedding day has faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of ordinary days. My savings are mostly restored, though they sit in the bank now with a different kind of weight, a reminder of what was lost and what was fought for. The dream of a cottage by the sea is still there, perhaps a little faded, but not extinguished. Maybe one day. For now, I find peace in simpler things. My small garden, which I tend with renewed care, feels like a metaphor for my life. It needed a harsh pruning, a painful weeding, but now new shoots are appearing. Resilience. It's a word I understand more deeply now. It's not about being untouched by hardship, but about how you grow back after being cut down. I focus on those who remain, those whose love is true and untainted. My grandson, Tom, is a frequent visitor. His laughter fills my small house, a sound more precious than any amount of money. We talk, we share meals, we build new memories, untainted by the shadows of the past. He is my anchor, my hope for the future. Do I still feel anger? Sometimes. A flicker. Sadness? Yes, a deep, lingering sadness for the daughter I thought I knew, for the potential she threw away. But mostly, I feel a quiet sense of peace. I stood up for myself. I reclaimed what was mine, not just financially, but morally. I refused to be a silent victim. There's a strength in that, a quiet dignity that sustains me. What would you have done, I wonder? Faced with such a betrayal, from someone so close? It's a question I wouldn't wish on anyone. But sometimes, life forces us to find a strength we didn't know we possessed, to draw lines in the sand, to fight for what is right, even when it breaks our own heart. The door to reconciliation with Sarah isn't locked and bolted, not entirely, but it is closed, and it would take a profound, genuine, and lasting change on her part for it to ever creak open even a little. For now, I choose peace. I choose the quiet joy of my garden, the warmth of Tom's affection, the steady beat of my own resilient heart. I am Eleanor Ainsworth. I am a survivor. And my story, though marked by sorrow, is ultimately one of strength and a hard-won, hopeful dawn.